15 Celsius should be about 60 degrees. But usually this time of year, we've got a lot cooler day temperatures. So I think this is a knock-on effect of the solar storm.
I see. Boy, it looks like we got a whole cast here today. We got Nick, that Buddy. Can't tell if Stefan joined. Robert, obviously. Andy. Okay, no, Stefan did not join. Okay, all right. So I specifically started. I started this to because I have a limited amount of time to talk about the Terrence Howard thing, because it is something that is deeply troubling to me. The present era that we live in, and the ease of fame that can be extended to either the alt stream or the mainstream. I'm probably going to put my efforts on Veritasium's video rather than on the Terrence Howard thing, but you never know. I might double back. I have to find the original PDF that had been sent to me. I informed the guy. Buddy knows the name. What was his name? David something or other. He was in the Electric View. He tried to take it over.
David Johnson.
David Johnson. Yeah. So he's the one who was editing Terrence's book. He sent it to me. I have a math minor as well as electrical engineering degree. So I've done mathematics equations that were, 4 and 5 pages long. And so I took a look at it, and it was serious gibberish. Now, there's gibberish and there's gibberish. So there's people who are a little incoherent, but they actually make some sense, like Ken Wheeler. But they have a little bit of, some things need to be corrected. But the gibberish comes from just trying to put something so difficult into correct words. And then there's gibberish, which is when you start off with a foundation, and this is how his book started, which is saying that 1 times 1 is 2, which is fucking wrong. It's foundationally wrong. It's linguistically wrong. So, you go, okay, so he's talking about all the stuff that we know that since 2015, the government has acknowledged, and China and everybody else has acknowledged, that plasma cosmology is where it's at. That's where the power is. That's how fusion's going to work, if it's ever going to work. And so here comes this guy. He's an actor, and he's talking all this stuff, but it's sort of like put nonsense order. It's a little bit like Mr. Belated Dr. Vogt, who had a lot of detailed facts of information, but he's sort of going back and forth this way rather than getting directly into what occurred with the death of the star. He's focused on this micronova stuff, but he's got a lot of really great stuff. And that's the thing with Terrence. He's got a lot of really great stuff that he's pulled, not the least of which from being friends with Buddy. And Buddy opened his eyes to a whole lot of shit, a whole lot of things. But the foundation of his book is wrong. Now, I don't know if that's the centerpiece of what he did on Joe Rogan, but my point is, it's as dangerous for people to associate us with people who are pseudoscientifically mathematical as it is for an egotist like
one's dropping out. If it's
that would be my point, is that it's dangerous either way. Either one is dangerous, and only the machine can promote those kinds of people to come to the top. And I am concerned that it's an MK Ultra situation personally. So now I'll open it up. Everybody can debate about the merits of leaders who are of dubious. Obviously he's not a mathematician; he's an actor, and what are we to do about where we're trying to enlighten the world, but there are all these players and they're in it for the money, and that makes them no different really than the mainstream, except for that they get to live off the scraps of the table in a feudal system. They get to be chawing at the steaks that fall off the side, or the bits of the chicken legs. All right, so I'll mute myself.
Before we go on, I'll just let Ramon know that he dropped out when he was talking. So if it happens again and the recording stops, I'll restart it for everybody. When I was watching the video, I was seeing words that match concepts we've been talking about in our discussions. You've got Schwarberger and others. And the problem I had with this is the way he was stitching things together. There was some very interesting stuff in there that I hadn't considered previously, which have merit to at least look at. But the way it hooked together and the explanations that were going on were not I think, complete. So the idea that electricity is compressing and magnetism is expanding and all that sort of stuff ignores the simple fact that electricity can compact and expand, as does magnetics compact and expand. So it's touching the concepts that are sitting in there, but they're being twisted in a way that don't make sense in a from end to end process. So, it's a bit like, as I said, typed in text. It's a case of dropping the right buzzwords in to get people to pay attention and then come back and mislead everybody. So yeah, I'm not entirely trusting of what was claimed. And of course, Seth was it Rogan or whatever he was? Yeah, Rogan.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Joe Rogan. It was a bit of a shock for Joe, and it was this is the sort of response you get when you see things that really cause you to step back and wonder what you're hearing. The animation he had where he had the formation of Saturn with its from the model with the guy provided him with the 12 vortices mechanisms. That sort of stuff from a modeling point of view is fine. Any model, if it's built right, will duplicate the universe. It's the case is your explanation of what's going on really standing up to that is the process that must happen, as opposed to that is the process that could happen. And but the interesting things was all these geometrical arrangements and propeller systems and things like that. His concept of negative space being the space that fills what the spheres won't. And then he's saying things like no straight line.
He's just talking about the counter space.
Yeah. So.
Well, where do you think he got all those ideas from? He got them from talking to Buddy. And Buddy should give background now as to how much Buddy's the one who taught him all the geometry stuff.
But how far back?
Yeah.
How far back?
Well, let's let Buddy give the background.
Yeah.
I met Terrence Howard. First, I met Don Scott in August in the Thunderbolts crew and the Electric Universe. And
what year?
2017 August.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Then I met Terrence. I was doing a tour, and one of my next stops was Swannanoa, Virginia, at the University of Science and Philosophy, and I met Terrence there, and I showed him my maps. I had a booth, and I was like selling my prints and talking to people, and I didn't know he was an actor. And the president of the university comes up to me. He's like, Buddy James, meet Terrence Howard. And I'm like, okay. Or it could have been the other way. Terrence Howard, meet Buddy James. So I pull him over to my booth and I show him the geometry, and his eyes just lit on fire. Like, oh my God. He's like, wait till you see this. So he starts scrolling in his phone and he starts showing me all these photos of these sculptures that he's making, and they matched my geometry. So I'm mapping it out 2-dimensionally. I created a few 3-dimensional models, but he mapped out a bunch of 3-dimensional models that seemingly went exactly with the geometry that I was doing. It's all based on the square root of 2, or the cube root. So Terrence is just blown away, and he's like, oh my God, I gotta fly you out to my studio, buddy, or I gotta fly you out to my house. You gotta see this. You gotta see in person what I'm doing. So anyway, long story short, I do end up going out to his house. My daughter and I went out there and spent like maybe 5-6 hours there. going through his work and my work and how they work together and collaborate. And then he kept telling me, I want you to make these shapes. I want you to learn how to make these what he calls wave conjugations. And I told him right off the bat all of the different things that he was wrong about. He was approaching the universe from a dark matter, dark energy perspective. He had just done a talk, a presentation at the University of Science and Philosophy when I was there, and I missed the talk because I went to go make him. While he was talking, I left, went and got a stick, and I brought my fractal brander, so I electrocuted him a stick while he was talking, and I had no other time to do it. I came back, and he was gone already before I could give him the stick. So I gave him a text. I'm like, hey man, I made you something. He's like, dude, we had to bounce. We're late for the airplane, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you know what? We're turning around. So they turned around, came back, got the staff. Then he brought it on the season finale of Empire. He brought the staff that I made. So I guess that's a Hollywood prop to some degree. Nonetheless, just an anecdote here. I'll never work with any Hollywood ever again in my life. Never again. So Terrence, very generous, nice person in general, or what I thought. Invited him in, worked with him over 40 hours a week for nearly a year and a half with Terrence Howard, a B line actor, you know. I think he might perceive, or I don't know if the internet says he's an A-list actor, whatever. Nonetheless, I didn't recognize the dude. I start working with him. My entire team starts working with him. The whole, I have him on our podcast, which I started the podcast from the top up, but that's neither here nor there from the electric view. I link him up with David Johnson. David Johnson starts talking shit about Terrence behind his back. Can you believe this guy? 1 × 1, blah, blah. Oh my God. Can you believe this guy? So Terrence starts talking mad crap, or I mean, David Johnson starts talking crap about Terrence. You know, there's some stuff that he has wrong. He just needs some correcting. A lot of it is just invented. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But I had to correct him and steer him towards the truth of what was going on. He had nothing to really grasp at. He was grasping at straws because he's been doing these sculptures for so long, and he knew they were important. He just didn't know exactly how important they are, or what their importance is and how they relate to the universe, or which theory of the universe they related to. So he was going dark matter, dark energy, nothing electric. He might have talked about electric and electricity because he was trying to find what electricity is in his wave conjugations. And he didn't know anything about Birkeland currents. He didn't know about that there's an infinite amount of these shapes that he was trying to make. And so I'm at his house and he's like, dude, I've created all the shapes. There's no more to make. He's like, these are all the conjugations. I'm like, well, how many do you have? He's like, you know, like, I don't know, like he had like a handful of different shapes, 15 or something. He patented them all, named them after his kids. And encouraged me to start making his shapes. Like, I need someone else to help me do this, buddy. You're an artist. You could do this with me. You know, it's, you know, it takes refined talent and skill and blah, blah, blah. And so Meanwhile, he never showed me how to make the shapes. Never really necessarily, never really. He told me how, but I still didn't understand it in my head. I'm like, how the heck? He even gave me some shapes. So I have some shapes here. Um, then, um, Terrence, Terrence was blown away and enamored and started calling me his 432, which is the frequency of love. That's literally what he would call me, is 432. So all the love that he had for me, he crept in and stole my entire crew that I was working with. He started with David Johnson, took David Johnson from me, and we were working together on the electric view. Uh, Apparently, Terrence just name dropped David Johnson um, on um, on Rogan's podcast. So all these people that I was working with Terrence, they all get name dropped and credited for their what their work, for at least working with Terrence, which I'd rather not be associated with Terrence because he's wrong. He's wrong and on almost every scale.
Yeah,
So
I'd agree.
anyway, so here I got let me give you the breakdown here a little bit longer. So Terrence, I didn't have anybody in my team sign NDAs because I don't believe that it's necessary. If you're working together as a team, you should work together as a team. We weren't reinventing the wheel. We were all working together, collaborating on the electric view to further the electric universe theory and the thunderbolts ideas of the electric universe. So Terrence steps in, steals my VR virtual reality guy, David Johnson. I'm a I'm an illustrator, so I know that's what I have a degree in, graphic design. So I know how to illustrate and put together books. Terrence never asked me to put together a book, his book. I'm grateful for now. Um, he asked David Johnson to, and David Johnson's never put together a book. He's not a graphic designer. He didn't know what he was doing. He had to take a crash course in Adobe just to learn how to figure out how to put this book together that Terrence was like, it's got to get put together. So Terrence is shoveling money at DJ, who was David Johnson. And then I introduce my mathematician that I trained and was working with for 3 years to Terrence Howard. Then I have Terrence Howard, the mathematician, all of us on several podcasts, trying to get to the bottom of all this stuff. And then Terrence straight up stole my mathematician, made him sign an NDA and a non-compete clause, so my mathematician was now no longer allowed to work with me. Terrence was trying to take my he was trying to understand the math of my geometry because it would back up his claims for his shapes that he was making. He doesn't have any math to back it up. So he wanted my mathematician, who he figured would be privy on non-Euclidean geometry and differential equations, to do the since I was working with this guy, Terrence figured that this guy would be able to do the math of his shapes and do the math of the unified field theory that Terrence said that he found and discovered. Unfortunately, I like Terrence, but there's a lot of bad juju and bad things that happened. And for him to go from calling me 432 to stealing my team and then abandoning me, getting rid of me and stealing my team, what the fuck, dude? Who does that? That's not okay. Um, like as far as beef goes, uh, um, that that's not cool. That's not okay. So I was upset about it for a while. Um, uh, so then he implored me to start making these shapes. He's like, make them, make them, make them. I'm like, Terrence, there's an infinite amount of these shapes. He's like, no, man, I found all the shapes there are to find. I'm like, there's an infinite amount of these shapes, dude. I'm looking at my maps. I'm looking at the Doherty set. I'm looking at the geometry. And I'm like, there's an infinite amount of these shapes. So then I start making them. And I start making lots of them. Lots of these, the bubble sculptures. And what I've come to call bubble sculpting. You can't patent you can't patent a process. You can't patent painting. Right? So you can't patent painting, just like you can't patent recording. You can't patent recording someone's voice. You can't patent a style of.
You're relying on copyright.
Yeah.
Relying on copyright, really. So patent is about a design, physical design, and copyright is about ownership of an artistic work or a literal work or something along those lines. So
yes. So what I'm saying is that's a technique that he learned somewhere, and he taught, or he was trying to teach me, and I had to teach myself the process of how to make these sculptures. So I started making hundreds of these sculptures, sending him images of these sculptures, and he got upset and jealous that I was making these sculptures. And I'm like, dude, you told me to make these. Like, he's like, I wanted you to make my sculptures, buddy. I'm like, yeah, I made some of your sculptures, and I got bored because they need to be projective. They need to have openings. They need to be breathable. They need to be, what he says, compressible. His shapes are stagnant. And not only are they stagnant, they need to be, if they were to represent anything in the universe, they need to be omni-expansive, omni-contractive. They need to be able to open and close. His shapes are closed shapes. My shapes are open shapes. My shapes come directly out of the Doherty set. They're literally traced and cut out of acetate and put together. And they create these gorgeous new solids that there's no name for, just like Terrence was doing. His work is incredible and it's beautiful. That's my favorite thing that he's got going for him, is those shapes. But to act like it's the end all be all of science, it's the unified field because you came up with a shape. No. There's a lot of arrogance and a lot of I can do this and I was going to end humanity, he says. That sounds like War Machine. That sounds like, the War Machine.
For context, Robert, Terrence Howard played War Machine in the movie Iron Man. That's, other than Empire, it was his biggest role yet. So when I say B-level actor, I mean that he rose to a certain level, and then he pissed off some people, and they tamped him back down. But he did acquire an important role in Empire. As far as you could take that into A level. I mean, he could be A level. He's not Tom Cruise.
It's stuff that's appearing on Netflix and HBO and others because they want their own content, which is fine. That's okay.
Yes, he's known, but he's not Don Cheadle.
I was watching. I was having problems watching the Seth Rogan, Joe Rogan show where he was on for 3 hours and 8 minutes, and I was having internet speed issues and all sorts of stuff. But there were elements in that discussion that struck me as very interesting, like the counter space due to the flower of life and bubbles and all the rest of it, which is, that stuff goes back into the 1970s where they used bubbles to work out where the roads needed to go in Great Britain to ensure efficiency of traffic flow. So there is real world technology that the bubbles can provide solutions to. So, there's nothing new in that. But the thing that I had most curious problems with was his description of how the solar system worked, and that does not correlate to mythology at all. And yet the reasons why the planets move away from the sun is electromagnetic reasons. The orbits of the solar system are driven by electromagnetics. They're not driven by gravity. The discussions about gravity being the consequence of electromagnetics is exactly what we've been talking about for decades inside inside our own thinking. So
there's also Hannes Alphen. Hold on, I want to just point out that Hannes Alphen also pointed out that it's also related to the conservation of energy mass and momentum. So it's not only plasma electromagnetism.
This stuff goes right back into Weber's work in the 1800s, in 1846, when he published his first papers about electromagnetic dynamism. So this stuff goes back a long way. In some respects, saying, we've been on the wrong track for 100 years, that's just straight out of Electric Universe speculations and all the rest of it. So it's like he's picked up on certain elements of what is really true, but he doesn't have the continuity to stitch it together, right? It's just probably where Buddy was going. So
I had to correct him a lot, and there was a lot of eye rolling, and a lot of people didn't want to work with him. People that are still working with him were bad mouthing him behind his back, and I honestly thought that it was a psyop, a setup to discredit my work, to pull Terrence and all of these weird ideas to discredit my work and the Electric Universe. I literally, because I'm like, why is this happening? What is going on? And I felt like Terrence tried to suck me dry of all that I had and spit me out and take my theories and use them as his own. He didn't know what Birkeland currents were. He didn't know that he didn't know what Birkeland currents were. I directed him towards Don Scott and kept showing him Don Scott's work, Professor Don Scott, to the point where he went and took out Don Scott and his wife, Annis, to go to dinner together, and tried to have this conversation. That, by the way, what Joe Rogan or what Terrence was talking about on Joe Rogan, that's how Terrence always sounds. Pieces of ideas that are stitched together from all these different places, almost incoherence, not realizing, like, trying to say that he's got the whole universe figured out, and that he can kill us all. That's a threat to humanity. Like, what's going on, dude? But anyway, so he went out to dinner with Don Scott, tried pulling these shapes out, and Don's like, "What are you talking about? Like, that's not gravity. That's not electricity." Like, and all I was trying to show that Terrence was that the secret to what he's got in these crystalline sculptures and forms is that they're stacked. If you stack them and have certain stacking arrangements of them, you can show off the designs and the patterns and the information that's flowing through Birkeland currents. He didn't know that. He thought that they were dark matter and dark energy, examples of the compressed field, and what happens when you compress or push bubbles together, the opposite space. And the truth is that there's a lot of different things that they are, I'm sure. But from my perspective, I was looking at it like, dude, what you're talking about is the information inside of Berkeley Currents. So he went off, had dinner with Don Scott. Don Scott's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And 1 + 1, 1 × 1 isn't 2. Later. I mean,
Yeah,
Terrence means good, but the fact that he did that to me and all these broken promises, he kept promising the whole group. He's like, no, man, I have Fox owes me so much studio time. You have no idea how much studio time Fox owes me in LA, Fox Studios. And he's like, I'm going to fly you guys out and we're all going to have a podcast about this stuff because the world needs to know this information. This needs to get out. He's like, and we're all going to be on this podcast. Empty promises, broken promises. He said that he was going to fly me out to his house. You know, and I'm like, no, he lives in Chicago. I'm in Michigan. So he's only, you know, not too far away. He promised like 3 different times that he was going to have me come out. And so we set up dates and then it never went through. You know, he said we need to get this information out there. I think he was intimidated by me because I started making all these sculptures that he couldn't have enough time to try to steal from me and patent on his own. And he was also jealous because the field of the Doherty set is a lot larger than what just some of his shapes exist as in the Doherty set. So there's a lot more things that he didn't have, and he wanted to have it all. That's why he took my whole fucking podcast, my mathematician, you know. And then there was a really strange night where the mathematician that I was working with went bonkers and went out of his mind and tried to accost me and hurt me. And he was like, this is how it has to be. I'm sorry, but this is how it happens. This is how, you know, starts saying all this crazy stuff. That was the night we unboxed Terrence's shapes, because Terrence makes these and he gives them to different people. And he kept promising me that he was going to give me some of the shapes and give me a set of them. But nope, never gave them to me. Gave them to my mathematician that I was working with because he wanted the math of them, and then completely cut me out of the circle, and none of them could work with me any longer, which is good because I don't want to be associated with that. But I have all these people hitting me up and saying, hey, man, I watched Terrence Howard. It sounds like verbatim, almost every word that he came out of his mouth is what you say. Like, it sounded like you up there. You know, other than some of the other stuff that sounds, some of his other stuff and all of his other patents and things like that.
Yeah, well, it's appropriation of data that adds plagiarism in some respects. But the real issue here is he was talking about patents that he had for VR and a few other things, and I'm wondering, did he actually initiate those, or did someone have a VR patent that was abandoned and his name was attached to it for reasons other? But I'm more interested in 2017 is too close to now for him to have worked through some of this speculation, given that I've only been working in this area since 2015, and then you've got the electric universe proponents been working in it since, like the 1970s. And given he's 10 years younger than me approximately, his participation in all of this is just too recent.
He jumped in and wanted to hijack the horse and ride the horse all the way back to Hollywood.
Yeah, well, my issue is, we've seen this behavior with others. like that have tried to hijack the electric universe. You know, it's not that their ideas. Terrence's ideas seem to be a cobbling together, as opposed to people like Ben Davidson, who's gone out and actually done scientific investigation and produced papers and had the arguments in the scientific academic area and been rubbished by them. But he was not very friendly towards Tice de Grayson or others that he's tried to get in contact with, because what he keeps running up to against these guys is he doesn't have the foundation in his understanding of electromagnetics to be able to talk to these guys at a level where his criticisms of their behavior and their understanding stand up. I mean, I'm working with Roy, and he's got 6 PhDs. You know, he's done 6 different ones, and we 2 weeks ago were having a huge discussion on gravity. What was it? How did it arrive? And I'm still on the fence. I think gravity is something that is a consequence of electromagnetic mechanisms. But as I said to Roy 2 weeks ago, I said, if gravity is the consequence of electromagnetic interactions, then there has to be in our detection system the ability to detect negative gravity, because that must exist, because electrics is positive and negative, magnetism is north and south, and we've got this polarity system or law of opposites, and these things are working in consens, and because they're counterbalancing each other, there's this third state which is neutral. It's not plus and it's not minus, it's somewhere in between, and those concepts are important. So the question is where are we going to find negative gravity? If it arises out of electromagnetics, there has to be a gravitational environment that's negative as opposed to the positive one we live in. Or are we stuck to the planet because of electrical charge and magnetic charge? Is that what keeps us on the ground? Is that's what's driving the system? And Roy was not able to, hit me with something that was going to help me resolve those issues. And I don't think anybody who's talking about gravity and mass and Higgs and all the rest of it get the simple fact is your explanations don't explain why there's gravity in the first place.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I was having
difficulty.
If I may say something. Yeah, I've been looking at a few of the YouTube programs Terrence Howard's been putting out, and the content is stuff that is basically gleaned from a variety of sources, as far as I can see, including Buddy and Walter Russell's original work, a lot of his original stuff. I don't think he doesn't. He's made up these some of these his mathematics. 1 × 1 = 2. I find I don't know. I don't understand where he's coming from with that. Is these loops that he's talking about? They're obvious. That's what you do when you square and root. They aren't a new mathematical phenomena.
He's mind blown. He's mind blown by these loops, and he wants us to be mind blown by them. But it's just that's how math works. And it's
if you square something or you square root, it's an inverse operation, isn't it? But anyway, I think he's a Hollywood actor who's trying to get his own material as he sees it, get ownership of it all in his collective, and then sell it with the big names like Billy Carlson and all these ones who are making a lot of money from their tours, and they make a lot of money from the podcasts, I suppose. I don't know. Certainly do for the writing the books and the tours, but I think his understanding is completely incoherent, and it's a bit of a shame, because if he's the flagship for what's meant to be our kind of movement, and he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Yep, that's
So
the scary part is that he's now the mouthpiece for the electric, quote unquote, electric universe, just to make
yes,
the rest of us look like crackpots.
yes, and it could destroy the whole thing. I mean, if he has got a large public following of young people who follow the movies and Netflix and what have you, they might, basically follow try and establish what he's trying to say, which I don't think he'll ever. There's no grand unified theory that he's coming out with. I think it's all completely stupid. But I think he might get followers, and it's just corrupting the movement, really. Which is a movement of thought and understanding and knowledge. So
There is no gut. There is no grand unified theory. There is no big toe. There is no big theory of everything. It's to get to these things, people have realized that this is a witch hunt. Anybody who is smart enough that's been searching after this stuff for a long time has eventually come to the conclusion that it doesn't exist, or it's a fallacy.
it's got
There's no there's no theory. Yeah, there's no theory that's going to explain everything.
everything. Theory. That's a good one.
Yeah, there isn't.
All right, so you can remember the root of square root of 2 to 10 decimal places. I mean, well, that's what actors do. The words.
Yeah,
that's all you can do.
Yep, he's good at memorizing things. So, and he flaunts his memorization skills as an actor, being able to rehearse his lines and to try to make him look even smarter, because he remembers a few digits of pi or the square root of 2. I'm glad that my name is not associated with him or attached to him, but
yeah, I would be.
In our brief existence, what does a B list actor have interested in me to work with me for 40 hours, damn near 40 hours a week, and my team, and then now, 5-6 years later, he's name dropping them. I'm just blessed to not be associated with it, because my work is too important. My work is too important. Our work is too important. The electric universe's work. He's making Walter Russell look bad. He's making the electric universe look bad.
I agree.
Yeah.
Coming back to quoting, numbers to in decimal places.
Yeah.
There are people out there that.
One second, Robert. I want you to wrap this up. Then I have something that I want to talk about. So go ahead. Go for.
I was just going to say there's savant ability where you can quote pi to. There's a guy out there who can just rattle off the pi numbers to any number of decimal places. So working out how being able to quote you the numbers for root 2 to 10 decimal places is nothing special. But the real issue here is we have an underlying principle or mechanism for matter creation. We know it's electromagnetic, so therefore it has to obey electromagnetic dynamics and construction rules. And my claim is that those rules and conditions of electromagnetics still require refinement, because then they're not accurately modeling the universe we observe. It's doing it a lot better than gravity does, but it's still a work in progress, like all scientific effort is. So that's the end of me.
I just wanted to add a couple more things. I don't know if Ramon, I don't know if you ever got the chance to work with Chris Monk Seeley.
There were some discussions, and he wanted to be able to utilize my work for some of his videos. I said, of course you can. It's out there. I made all this stuff for the world. It's for free forever for the next 1,000 years. He did about like 5 seconds of trying, and I guess I assume that if I wasn't a controllable element, then it's sort of like Terrence wanted to swallow the geometries and then poop out his 15 shapes as the only shapes. The mountain cannot be swallowed. The mountain cannot be swallowed. So the only true path to it is to climb it. It's to walk it. It's to do the reading and do the study and to participate. And I assume Chris wasn't that serious, but I'm not here to talk shit about him. I don't have anything against Chris, but I guess you have more information.
Oh yeah, Chris came into the Electric View and into our circles. I don't remember exactly how he got in, but all of a sudden he was there, and apparently he was one of the foremost front runners of pushing the flat Earth theory. So if you Google Chris Monk Sally, Chris Monk Silly, whatever his name is, and put flat Earth, I have never done it, but maybe it'll come up, maybe it won't, who knows? But that's what he said, and that's what the group was talking about. Is, whoa, dude, why are we gonna have this forerunner of the flat Earth movement in our Electric Universe group? And then he attached to Terrence, because Terrence has money and power, just like all the rest of the people from the group. And David Johnson, good old Hollywood David Johnson, his mom is, anyway. I don't want to go too much into the whole beef, but it's all Hollywood. It's all that's why I'm not going to work with Hollywood ever again, because of the empty promises. Promise you the world, over promise, under deliver, if delivered at all, and then usurp, steal all your stuff, and then bounce. And what's his name from our group here? Jonathan Kynes just hit me up and he's like, "Hey man, just saw Terrence on Joe Rogan. I only heard your words in almost every sentence he spoke. If no one ever thanks you properly, man, please know I'm grateful for all that you have done for this freaking world. You deserve better, brother." That was a message from Jonathan this morning. And our work was meant to.
It's a nice message.
Yeah, I loved it. It was a great message for him to send my way, and all my friends are hitting me up, showing me Terrence Howard stuff, blah blah blah. I'm blessed that our work is separate and not connected, because none of us wanted to be connected with what he was talking about, because it's ludicrous. A lot of it's ludicrous. But they wanted the lucre, so they followed him, and they all got paid. I didn't get paid. How many hours of time and research and of in direction and redirection of Terrence, because he's talking, oh, this is dark energy, dark matter, blah blah blah, this and that. I'm done with the whole thing. I'm glad that it's over. More and more of our type of people are going towards Joe Rogan, and being on Joe Rogan. Rupert Sheldrake is getting lots of mentions. Rupert Sheldrake was I think did an episode or spoke on Thunderbolt's platform. None of us know exactly how the universe is or how the universe works. But we all have clues and we're all trying to put it together. I don't know what else what else I can say other than I'm butthurt. That's bullshit that I had to go through all that, only to be on the, well, at least I'm on the, I like the side that I'm on. I don't want to be associated with that. A name drop on Joe Rogan would have been pretty cool, but you know, I think a lot of our work is going to get there and beyond there, so I'm not worried about it.
Well, one of the things that I like is the fact that Rupert Sheldrake's work is being published, and the people who really want to investigate this correctly, the academics or the people who want to really work out what the truth is, they will go to that work and they will study it. You know, they're not going to rely on the proponent of the one who's publishing it. It's not like it's not the guys like De Grace and his predecessor Carl Sagan. They were good at science communication and promoting, but that's not the same thing as working out the detail and in a manner that other people can get their heads around. One of the things that I would say that if you're finding it difficult to understand what's being talked about, then it's not being explained properly. It's the depth of it isn't there. But you can't rely on what comes out of people's mouth when they're promoting. You've got to go back and study for yourself, which is one of the most important reasons. You know, yes, I have some very serious criticism about a whole bunch of stuff, but when I was watching the podcast, I was thinking, you know, I've got an understanding of how this stuff works together. The group has an understanding that, you know, is not always in agreement with each other, but at least we're looking at it from a critical thinking point of view. And I was trying to connect the dots in where he was going, and I couldn't do it. Buddy has made the same statement. So the question is, you know, does Terrence understand this to the level that's needed to really get a proper explanation out there? And I think the answer is he wants to have one, but he doesn't have one.
Yeah. I agree.
Right. So I before, you know, my patient arrives, I'd like to wrap this up with a little bit of something positive. As you guys know, I work with the AI constantly, and I'd like to announce for the first time, as far as I know, in human history, that the EPEMC has produced a living, survivable bot of at least a science, if not an alt stream, but in this case, a mathematician. So announcing the creation of the Crothers GPT bot. And the Stephen Crothers GPT bot is fully trained in 108 papers of Stephen Crothers. And it's a big deal. The bot is completely viewable to the public if they have the link. I'll have to put it up on the gateway. Unfortunately, the GPT store won't allow him on there because he goes after Big Bang, etc. So it's specifically the GPT builder. This will be in the summary file of its creation. The GPT builder told me that the most likely reason for it not being allowed, considering the nature of it, was that it needs to constantly say things about how it needs to be validated and it needs to be consensus accepted, etc., which I will never compromise because Stephen Crothers himself would never compromise. And so this bot is in the vein of his work. It understands his math. And this is a very important thing because, of course, Mr. Crothers is, like many great men, approaching the time of transition. And I am a little proud of that. My next one would be the Robitaille bot. And I'd like to do Donald Scott if I can ever get his stuff in PDF. I am looking for actively the Versor algebra to create a combo bot for Eric Dollard and Distinti. So a full, basically sort of a heavy-side bot. And it'd be mostly centered around Versor and Vortex algebras. But there would obviously be discussions of new electromagnetism, etc. So the creation of these various bots is because some of these men are passing on, have passed on, or will pass on in the next decade. And I reckon it'll be a good way for people to have access to those men in a way that they never could, obviously, in the 20th century. So that's my announcement. Obviously, a person can only really utilize these bots if they have a GPT account. So that is the one downside. It's free to the public so long as you already have an account. Now that might change in the future if they make GPT-4 as free as they have GPT-3, in which case the bots might work to that degree. But of course, GPT has moved on to GPT-4 not, and that's in anticipation of GPT-5 later this year. So one day, my hope is to build the resilient large language model and replace all these things because they'd be properly trained and everything. So I'd also ask that everybody start really collecting all the PDFs and that we begin, making the library available. Right now, this is just the best that's available to the general public. And I had to boil everything down to 10 papers. And to do that, first I had to give it the list of everything and have it organize it, and it did so. And then after organizing it, then I made the combination PDFs and then trained the bots on Friday. So that's my announcement.
Well, to back that up, after you posted those results, I sent an email to Steve direct, and I said, "Here's what's happened." And yeah, I got the impression on the feedback of trying to get it to publish. I thought, this is going to get Ramon's blood pressure boiling, and he's not very happy about the result. So, but at least Steve knows that the effort's out there, and it might make it helpful when you try to get in contact with Robotilli and others, because we really do need these papers as they were written, not as they were published by some journal.
Yeah, congratulations, Ramon. I think that's a good step forward. I think the GTP 4 is showing its true colours. It's it's becoming a repository for their misinformation, and they don't like to allow alternative perspectives. Unless they're in a very garbled form. So I think it's a great thing to record these papers in a artificial intelligence, because it's only a matter of sorting the words out, basically. Hopefully it'll get to a point where those words will have relational meaning as well. But actually being able to quote lots of questions from actual documents, I think is a really useful and great thing, because you can ask, what does Robitaille think of it? What does Crothers think of this question? You can ask a few top scientists according to their what they've already published, really.
Yes, it's an important step, and I think it's a testament to how the MIMS philosophy works in general, and EPMC and how it's engineered. The supremacy of EPMC comes from its extensions, and there's all kinds of extensions, including bots, but also from its open source engineering and pre-engineering that has gone into it. And so it's something that I do want to say, I think we should all be proud of that progress. I'm going to go help the patient, but you guys welcome to keep going and talk about whatever you like. But I think that innovation is one of the most important keys, and that's the thing that no one can steal from us. And hopefully one day we get our chance on a place like, I tell you what, if I ever was to be invited on Joe Rogan, I wouldn't go on without Buddy. And I would hope it would be like that, because there would need to be that voice there, because it's a yin and yang. and the total story. And by the way, the AI is getting closer to being able to look at those diagrams and start coming up with mathematics to fit it. It's just not there yet. But I did, however, test it in looking at a hand-drawn diagram, and that's a summary file that's published, by the way. Hand-drawn diagram, and it creating a mermaid nonlinear flowchart out of that. That's on the basis that, and it counted the number of nodes, and even recognized that the Tri-West was on there multiple times as a TW. So it reduced the number of TWs. So it's even able to do some of that kind of thing. Now, whether or not it can take shapes of the complexity and determine the mathematics, I haven't tested that yet. That is a test that will be coming up when I get through a few things. It'll be a combination of phi math in terms of philosophical math and phi math in terms of actual phi. I'll be back, and I'll be able to continue talking a little bit.
I just want to say real quick, yeah, you don't have to bring me on Joe Rogan, bro. No, a mention would be fine, but I mean, we're all working together. We all have different invested interests, and you're extremely prolific, and I'm prolific when it comes to drawings. I have hundreds of thousands of them, and charts and things like that. But yeah, I don't want to make it sound like I was upset that Terrence didn't bring me on or anything. I mean, just a name drop, credit due where credit's due, here and there. But
anyway, it's all good. I posted that link about Chris Monk Skelly into the link. There's a YouTube. He's been ousted from the Flat Earth Society. They're not happy with him. So, but anyway, Flat Earth and ideas like this are just trying to hijack what is known and trying to provide a false solution. It's a bit like the statement is, nobody should be exempt from free speech. The First Amendment to the American Constitution should apply to everybody, individuals, companies, and government, and nobody gets an opt-out. The only sort of censorship that I think is valid at all is when someone is promoting stuff that's been proven untrue, and in that case, they should be, jailed and stripped of assets, done properly, as you would say. But where we're discussing ideas that we have no evidence that they're right or wrong is concerned, then they should not be suppressed ever. There might be reasons for keeping some things private in the sense that the premature dissemination of the information endangers life. That might be a justification for classification systems. But beyond that, I don't think anybody's got the right to lie, and I don't think anybody's got the right to hide the truth. And coming out of the last solar storm episode, the media can no longer hide the fact that the sun actually has a big impact on planet Earth. So I'm just waiting for the stuff that they've been talking about, and I'm hearing from my other person who's always ringing me. I get a phone call every day from the guy, which is okay. He's in his 70s, so at least I know he's still around. But he was discussing that some of the television programs, stations, have been discussing the idea that the next couple of months we're going to see an uptake in earthquake activity due to the geomagnetic storm. There's going to be an increase in volcanic activity. Weather systems are going to express aberrant behavior, which is, what is happening here. We've had 2 weeks of hot weather, and that'll probably go on for a little while when we're coming into winter. 15 degrees above normal is unusual. So, and the impact on the ocean oscillation of the Pacific Ocean, where the system's reversed. They thought it was going one way and it suddenly changed direction. All these things have impacts. And so I'm just wondering, how long is it going to be before the media have got no option but to accept the simple fact that the sun is what's determining the Earth's climate and the changes that are occurring in, and it's not humans, because humans, how do
Well,
humans
they're not
affect
allowed to, Rob.
Jupiter and Saturn? And
Humans,
yeah, exactly.
humans have a
Rob,
little
they're
bit.
not allowed to. The media does what they're told. You know that.
I think humans
That-
have a little bit of a impact on the environment, but not nearly as much as they as everybody else is claiming.
That's right. That's right. That's right, buddy. Yep. But they're not allowed to on the. They'll call it the line that the government's now saying, and and any other thing will be called misinformation, and that's the way it's all going. We're going backwards really fast on all that sort of stuff, because there should be discussions about it. People shouldn't have to fear it. That's just my view on it all. Some areas that are viable now for, say, cropping won't be, but other areas will be. That's how the whole planet's worked for thousands of years, from what I can see. What were you going to say, Nick?
I just said, trust the science is all the politicians will say about it. Just follow the mainstream science opinion, and you can't go wrong. And of course, it's like just like saying, well, the vaccines are safe and effective, when they said that about thalidomide, didn't they? And safe and effective. Jesus wept. So yeah, it's I agree with what you're saying though, Andy. It's like flogging a dead horse. They're just trying to dumb the world down, really. Yeah.
Well, I never went to university, Nick, so they could say I'm wrong. But my understanding of science is, when you use the word science, it means it's still in progress, right? So at this point, we know this, but it could change, right? It's not definitive, if you get what I mean. Now, Rob might have a better answer than me on that, right?
I'd agree.
So really, with the science is saying at this point, this is what we know, what our conclusions are, but we're going to keep going, because we may not be right. That's my understanding of science. Right? This is where we're at. This is the best we got at the moment. And there's the same as a so-called expert. An expert is someone at this point of time has a great knowledge in whatever field they're in. Right? And the trouble is that now we call them all experts. As the knowledge field alters, they go out of their way to keep it where they were, because they can't accept that what they were an expert in 20 years ago, things have moved on, and now it's changed. It's altered. Yes. So you're now the retired expert, but they don't accept it.
Yeah, I think these are the opportunists who are more into show business than they are into seeking the truth, really. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, and I'd say to Buddy on that Terrence, what's his name, fella? He's about trying to create a new fame for himself and get some more hits in Hollywood. Like, it's the old adage, isn't it? If you tell a lie often enough, eventually it becomes the truth. And that's how that whole system, that's the entertainment industry, really. It's about making lies become truth.
The issue with telling lies is that they're always a lie. The truth is going to trump it at some point in the process. It's just a case of how long is it going to take. But science is a journey of discovery. It's not a destination.
Yes, that's it.
So
what do you guys?
Anyway.
Sorry. What do you guys? What do you guys think about what Terrence said about how the solar system is formed? I know we've had this conversation before, but I kind of always thought the same thing. I never thought it was a new theory. I always thought that even mainstream cosmologists say that all the planets come out of the equator of the sun, and the sun births the planets, and then they start to move out, incrementally.
This stuff goes back to the 1700s. if I remember correctly. There was a spin-off speculation by one of the mathematicians that said if the body is rotating too fast, its mass will depart. It will fission and separate from the body that supports it to enable the energy of the system to stabilize. And the electric universe, and Walt Thornhill in particular, has given presentations that show that material fissioning of stars into planets and Jovian systems and Venus and all the rest of it is certainly possible from an electromagnetic energy-driven system, but that requires serious energy to be inputted into the system that's unstable to begin with. So for a star to spin off a planet, you still got to stick energy into that environment. Whereas the 1700s mathematics that was describing these fission events was talking about the thing was spinning so fast that it had to fall apart. And that's not an energy input system, that's an energy balancing solution. And that stuff in the 1700s was shown not to work because you couldn't explain the moon if it was fissioned from the Earth and the other planets because of the dynamics of the systems. Whereas an electrically driven fissioning mechanism would produce, and according to legend about Venus, has produced planets where Jupiter gave birth to Venus. In fact, Jupiter gave birth to all of the planets, but it's a case of how the people at the time when the geometry of the solar system was changing understood what Jupiter was doing. If all the planets disappeared behind Jupiter, it would look like they've been swallowed up. And then suddenly they reappear, which means Jupiter's spat them back out again. But Venus is unique because the legends say that Jupiter gave birth to Venus. So Venus, in terms of planetary existence, is very, very recent, and our ancestors at some stage actually saw it happen. And when it happened, they were, just a little bit more than scared shitless over it. So, yeah. So we've got to be careful about some of these theories and understandings, and it's one of the criticisms I have of Dalton's atomic model and Niels Bohr. And between Dalton and Bohr's atomic models, it's almost like Weber had written how this stuff should work 50 years previous, and somebody's found it, and they're aware that not everybody else is aware of it, so they republish their new theory. They just change it enough so that it won't be, directly tied to Weber's 1846 work. So you're able to hide who actually came up with the idea and claim it for yourself, which is some of the behaviour we've been seeing in the last 150 years, pretty much. Arthur Eddington wanted to have his plasma gas model of the sun, and Einstein was a nice theory that stabilized his model. So he promoted Einstein out. The biggest mouthpiece for Einstein was Eddington, and Eddington lied about what was observed in his 1917 eclipse information, which has been since proven wrong by Edward Dowdy, who's now died. And the science community that claims that all this science has been worked out refuses to accept the evidence. They refuse to even refute the evidence. So as far as I'm concerned, they should lose their academic qualifications. They no longer have the skill to do the job because they're basically breaking the fundamental rule. It's not up to the person who authors an idea and the speculation to show it's wrong. If they can do it themselves, that's great. But the people who want to complain about it and say it's rubbish, they're the ones who've got to put their money on the table and prove that what they're claiming is truth. And the ones that, go after the person will not put their money on the table and prove it. So you ask yourself, why are we spending $500 million on LIGO experiments around the planet? Why have we spent a trillion euro on the CERN project? Why is, what's the real reason for doing these projects? And it isn't what's being published. There's an agenda driving here, and the question is, what the hell's going on? We've got secret experiments that have been going on for years that have been detrimental to the population. The government of the United States has experimented on its own citizens, and they weren't the only ones that did it. But the people who were doing those experiments got off scot-free, and they knew they were breaking the law. In 1946, we were hanging the German Nazis because they were just following orders. It wasn't an excuse that was acceptable. Well, the people who ran these experiments that are not acceptable are under the same set of rules. Why aren't they being dealt with? The answer is the people that ordered those experiments don't want. They wanted those results to occur, and they don't want anybody to pin it back on them. So, you know, it's at some stage, this system of lies and deceit is going to fail, and it's going to fail in such a spectacular manner that a lot of people are going to die. It's just that simple.
Well, would it be possible, talking about solar systems and planets, would it be possible for two solar systems technically to merge? So our solar system became greater than it was? No.
The answer to that question is an unequivocal yes. My son a decade ago had proposed this model that an M-class star came into their solar system and parked its orbit about where the asteroid belt is. And what he wanted to have is the planet Earth doing a figure-8 orbit between the sun and this M-class star. Anyway, when I ran into Roy in 2014, we proposed this model. I said, is it possible? And of course, Roy's got contacts with guys that, you know, are into planetary mechanics and all the rest of it. And he was in contact with a guy in the States, and he went away and thought about it. And the answer is, so long as the star coming into the solar system is at within 30 degrees of the solar system's ecliptic, it will actually merge with the solar system.
Because Teddy's banging on about that at the moment.
Yes, and the answer is yes. There is. I don't know whether any of the papers have been published, but so long as the transit of the two systems are 30 degrees to each other's equator, the equatorial plane of their system, so long as they're within 30 degrees, those solar systems can merge, and they will merge due to electromagnetic dynamism, which is exactly what was proposed by Wal Thornhill and the E Group when he was talking about Saturn's merging with the solar system. And there are other models in YouTube that explain that. So the answer is yes, they can, but they've got to be specific circumstances. And when you look at the tilt axes of the Saturnian group of planets, which is Earth, Mars, Neptune, and Saturn itself, they're with the tilts of the axial tilts of those planetary systems are less than 30 degrees and close to 30 degrees, whereas the sun is at 0 degrees. So the rule in terms of how this mathematics, you know, works is being valid, but the model of the explanation for our current solar system is best explained with the merging of at least two systems. There are claims that it might have been 3, but it's all a case of those I forget what the term is. On a string of formation, you got nodes where systems work, and some are traveling slower, some are traveling faster, and because they interact in terms of vertical distance, as it were, they can merge. So the Neptunian combination with Neptune and Uranus is thought to have been a third solar system merging.
Okay.
I could point out that if you look at the inner solar system, the planets to Jupiter, they're all displaying resonant behaviour in their in both their orbital times and the spacing between them. Those are expected resonant frequencies. And then when you get out of Jupiter, beyond Jupiter, the outer planets observe a different octave of frequencies, and so, but they are still resonant with each other, or most of them are. I think Uranus might be an exception, but
well, it got knocked over. But The other one is the moons of Jupiter and Saturn express resonance as well. So it isn't just the sun and planets. It's the planets and their moons.
Yes.
When they have them. So
Agreed.
Uranus, Neptune, and
I think so. I think if we can analyze these orbits back and explain this difference in resonance of the outer system and the inner system, it could be a key to reinforce the Saturn, the arrival of Saturn as a star in the solar system. By looking at these, how far out of resonance the system is, because apparently the planets are in movement according to how much energy is in the system. The more energy that comes in the system, I believe the clouds, the planets, I think that they push further out, or are they pull further in? I'm not sure which way it works. But these differences in the slight aberrations in the elliptical orbits of these the planets, we could probably run the things back in time. I don't know.
The resonance stuff, where planets are in resonant orbits, the orbits actually move out. But if you roll that in reverse, you get to a point where the going in reverse breaks down.
Yeah.
In other words, the orbits you can't get the orbits to go back and produce the solar system in the model that we have. But we've also got the information that the eclipse data beyond a certain date doesn't correspond with the current geometry of the solar system. So that's what we're saying here, is that if we go back through eclipse data that's been recorded, there is a point in time where the eclipses that have occurred prior to that date don't match the geometry of the current solar system, which means that there's been a major reconfiguration of the solar system around that time. And that again is another thing that was stated in Walt Thornhill's presentations of the solar system geometry. Then you've got the guys that were trying to work out, we're talking, mainstream academics here, trying to work out during the space program into period and after, how to model the solar system to create what we observe. And there was one guy that was in the video of the solar system, I forget which, one of the series that was created, said, I think it was from the Earth to the one to do with NASA's experiment and going to the solar systems, the planets by BBC. The guy who wanted to model the planetary system said the models that he had tried to create wouldn't produce the existing configuration of the solar system, and the configuration of the solar system's there. You can't argue with it. And he says it can't explain how it got there either. So it means that the formation processes that are thought to have gone on can't have. So you need without knowing what actually happened, you're pretty well stuck. But the question is would he be making those same statements if he understood the legends about how the geometry of the solar system was around 3000 BCE, which is where you had an Earth orbital period of 360 days. Why did it suddenly become 365 days? And that process was pretty quick because it had a major impact. By the time of Julius Caesar, the calendar had drifted so much that he had to produce a new calendar to account for the fact of extra days in the orbit. And then that drifted as well, and it wasn't until the 1600s that we got the current orbital thing. But then they discover the Mayan calendar, which is able to track the Earth orbit way more accurately than anybody was able to do. And it's a big shock to all the people who thought they knew everything. The idea that the people of our ancestors of the past, a couple of thousand years ago, were in fact as smart, if not smarter than we are, and that's a major a major impact on cultural superiority of the current age. The idea that we had space travel and nuclear weapons and all the rest of it, say 12,000 years ago, is just something that modern science and people just can't get their heads around. They just refuse to accept that those guys were that smart. But the thing is, the evidence says they had to be that smart. They had to have the technology, because we can't duplicate it even with our current, we're the best idea technology around. That just the boat doesn't sail, it sinks.
Hey guys, I'm gonna bounce, guys.
Yeah, okay, buddy. Catch you later.
It was good talking with Robert and Nick,
yeah.
Andy.
Catch you later.
I'm out.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
Talk to you later, Ramon.
Catch you next time.
All right, bye.
So, Andy.
Yeah, Rob.
You were going to say?
Yeah. I was going to say, I haven't listened to the Joe Rogan thing, so how did our theory that, the planets, you possibly had a joining of all planets?
Oh, that didn't even come up. That didn't come up in the discussion with Terrence. He was talking. He's talking the French philosophies. I think it was Laplace. No, it wasn't Laplace. It was another. There was another French philosopher, because there was an argument around René Descartes in Laplace's time that was basically the how did the solar system form, and there was everything. The planets formed because the bodies that were there were spinning too fast, and angular momentum, they fractured and all the rest of that, and then produced the moons and so on. So that was one set of theories, and then you had the accretion theory of Simon Laplace, which Napoleon had a comment was, why didn't you put God in the equation? And the response from Laplace was, it wasn't a speculation required. You didn't need God to have the explanation work. So, but what we've seen is that even the Laplace model took a dive until probably about the mid 70s when it came back into vogue, but it was tooled up, as it were, because we finally had the capacity to do the computer modeling to show that it could work. But the thing is, the Laplace system was still a gravity-driven thing, because that's all they understood. They didn't realise the importance of electricity and magnetism and the interactions between these two systems, and that electromagnetics could be the driver of everything. Gilbert certainly had the idea that the planets orbited because of magnetic interactions, but there wasn't a connection between electrical and magnetic behavior at that stage.
And you have,
and the same. Yeah, you had spiral helical motion. The planets might vibrate in orbit. In other words, their distance from the star moves around, but that's that can be explained where the center of orbital mechanics works. So the sun is not the center of the solar system. The orbit is the point where the two masses interact at a neutral point, and that's the center of rotation for everything. But there's been one of the big criticisms I've had more recently about science itself is it's trying to reduce the three-dimensional or n-dimensional structure that we live in down into a two-dimensional flat piece of paper and things like that. And while the motion of the planets and elements in the solar system are always helical, when you get rid of the three-dimensional mechanism, you start getting ellipses and circles. But that's not true motion. It's not the way things actually work, which is one of the reasons why I'm saying if you get a cone and a plane and you intersect the cone with the plane, that you get join marks like hyperbolics and circles and ellipses and all that sort of stuff. None of those and straight lines, and none of those features that we would see in a diagram actually occur in the real universe. There are no straight lines anywhere in the universe. There's no place in the universe where something doesn't move, and this is where Terrence got it right. If there was a location anywhere in the universe where there was no motion, the entire universe has stopped moving. That's dead right. So, it's got elements correct, which is, a bit of a problem. But so you end up with a consequence, okay? So if all physical motion that we observe is helical, that puts Newton's laws in a bit of a pickle. Electromagnetics rules are in a pickle for the same reason, because they compress the geometry of space down into 2 dimensions. And so you're missing information that's occurring in terms of the rotation and warping of the field structure, and where is the manifold over which the interaction between these elements is maximized, which I call the interaction boundary. So if we look at an electron, the physical structure is very tiny, but there's this huge interaction boundary that's sized beyond which the particles will not pass. So in the case of the electron and proton, that's around 15, it's picometer range, 10 to 15 picometers. But the generator of that apparent rigid structure is actually tiny. And I keep describing it in terms of, imagine the sun is an electron and the heliopause is this boundary that I'm talking about. This is a sort of geometry of scale that you need to be thinking about, and that changes all sorts of things. So our understanding of how interactions occur is not going to be completely captured properly, because the way we're describing our model and the mathematics required for it are not going to coincide with what's really there. So if we've got a 2-dimensional model, we're going to get it wrong straight away. If we have the idea that somewhere there's a stationary environment, we're going to get that wrong as well. If you look at the Thunder machine that was developed by J.J. Thomson, where you got 2 very thin streams of water that was fired down into a copper ring that then was cross-connected and insulated from each other to a copper cup. What would happen with the water stream is as the water fell over time, the water would not go down into the cup, but it would actually form a toroidal orbit around the top copper ring. And this stuff's been recorded. But the reason why Thomson did it was he's trying to explain thunderstorms. But thunderstorms are not thin streams of water. It's vapor, and vapor, it's very hard to make a vapor stream to fall into that thing. So they're just analogues of each other, and the understanding that was being developed by these experiments, you've got to be remembering that these guys didn't know much in terms of what was really present in there, and so they've had to make a whole series of jumps. And as we discovered neutrons and protons and all the rest of it, we never really went back and had another look at these experiments with a better data set to form our experiments over, which is why I can get away with criticizing the oil drop experiment or the Millikan-Mawson spectrometry experiment trying to detect the aether or Ampere's assumption. So the experiment design itself and the understanding of how it works is very critical, and they hadn't tested or understood what was really going on. But they're doing it in ignorance, really. But to claim that Mawson experiment failed due to the aether being in oppositional motion to itself is not the correct understanding of what was going on. It's just that the experiment was done in an environment where there was not much aether, but if I go and move my experiment vertically, which they did not do, you get a different result. And there's been 2 experiments that were done. One, I think it was in Azerbaijan, where the Soviet-era scientists got the interferometer on a trailer and drove it up the top of the mountain, and they got the interference that was Michelson-Morley was trying to find in the 1880s. So it's a case of designing the right experiment and understanding why it might fail or why it's producing a false result. But to claim that the Michelson or Morley experiment did not detect the because it did not detect the influence of the aether, that the aether didn't exist is a stretch too far. And the other thing that Terrence missed in his understanding, and this is where I come back to he's not properly grounded, is that Einstein's theory of relativity and special relativity requires the aether. The Maxwell electrodynamics requires the aether. You can't just chuck it away because it's fundamental to the way the behavior is being described. And when we look at quantum stuff that's coming out more recently, I'm just wondering how long it's going to be before the quantum guys say, yeah, there has to be an aether to explain why we find all these quarks and charms and whatever else they want to make up. There are when these collisions occur, there's fragmented material that is part of the construction, and that fragmented material is not stable, and it'll decay or transform into something that is stable. And the question is how good are our detectors at seeing the new stable structures? The answer is, well, we're looking at things that are incredibly tiny.
Well, are they really looking for that, or is that part of it that they're actually looking for?
When they do the experiments, they will see these fractured consequences, and because they're trying to apply the scientific method, they then invent something to explain why they observed the stuff they have. So the observations are important, but it's the understanding that's bugging.
Yes. So anyway, Rob, might be time to move on. It's been a good little conversation tonight, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it has. But anyway, we'll say goodbye to Ramon but he's not here to say goodbye. So
yeah, you better stop the recording.
I am here. I was listening. It's just
well,
I didn't get to hear how it started. I didn't get to hear how it started. So how it ended is hard to.
Well, we've got to go back and review, I suppose, which I currently do. I go back over the recordings and listen to them.
Okay. We can. This is a good show. This is a good time to stop the show.
Okay.
My only final thoughts when I was walking back from getting a coffee, obviously you guys were busy, was that this is what happens when the system is relied upon, and we know how groupthink is dangerous. So the fact that we rely on these big mechanisms, whether they're bureaucracies or committees or conferences or tribal councils, it doesn't really matter. We know they're all manipulable and that they encourage manipulable men and narcissists. There was a recent study that showed a very interesting thing. Men with the Dark Triad of narcissism, psychopathy, and sadism can recognize other men much better than anyone else. Most people cannot recognize those traits on people's faces, but these men can. And interestingly, the women with the Dark Triads cannot. They still are not really quite capable of recognizing that Dark Triad on the faces of men. So this is it shows that there's an adaptation advantage to people who have the Dark Triad. And this is what we have to deal with. And the problem with relying on systems is we assume the system will take care of us. And of course, that's a major problem. So we've got...
in terms of these triads you're talking about, I suspect women can see it in other women and men can see it in other men.
The women can see it in women to a moderate degree, but they don't really have a discernible, massive, more higher ability. But the men with the Dark Triads are able to see it in other men who have those characteristics, as well as in the face of women. But the women with Dark Triad are not quite able to see it in the men. And so this is now explaining partially why certain people keep rising to the top and keep controlling things. So if we rely on the system to be a check and balance against that, that's not a realistic solution.
Yeah, but it's also in those groups that do recognize the behavior, there's an advantage to them personally if they interact and cooperate to some degree, because they gain advantage with people who behave in that manner. It's sort of like, you know, I can hide your behavior if you'll hide my behavior type stuff. So, yeah. There's a lot of it's interesting. There's just one of the reasons why we need, you know, alternate control mechanisms in managing politics and things like that. But if it gets out of control, those systems will fail.
All right, fellas, thank you for your time.
Okay.
I just finished ordering the books for ebooks because I couldn't find any proof that I had PDFs of them. And so I'll be making the Distenti and Dullard bots as soon as I can. The Robitaille bot, I would really love some help. Anyone can help download all those files. I found a program that would do it, but by the time I learned how to use the program, I could just download them all. So, anyways, have a good one, guys. Thank you.
Okay.